The gaslighting ain't gonna work on us anymore, you ninnies. The wicked flee when no man pursueth, but the righteous are bold as a lion. All hands on deck, folks. Since I live here in the great state of West Virginia, I took upon myself the task of emailing my legislators, starting with Senator Joe Manchin, Senator Shelley Moore Capito, and Congressman Alex Mooney. I emailed them about House Resolution 1303. This is titled, Establishing the Marxist Roots of Critical Race Theory and Detail the Threat This Divisive Ideology Poses to the American Republic. This resolution was submitted to the House of Representatives. I urged my representatives at the federal level to look over this resolution and then to vote in favor of it if they're given the chance. I also emailed all of my conservative state legislators here in West Virginia to look at it and to create something similar here in my home state. And I suggest you all do the same. Now, it was Dr. James Lindsay, a prominent voice in opposition to CRT, that tweeted about this resolution shortly before he was banned from Twitter. Hashtag Free James Lindsay. Now, this resolution, or something similar, would greatly help fight the Marxist evil that is critical race theory. CRT began in legal studies, but it was never meant to stay there. When you hear about diversity, equity, and inclusion, white privilege, or things like we live on stolen land, or the system of oppression, that's CRT at work. Since liberals in politics, in media, and in our local school board meetings like to gaslight those opposed to the lies of CRT, in this episode I'm offering some easily searchable online examples of CRT. So, I'm going to start with two very prominent legal scholars. In their book titled Critical Race Theory and Introduction, authors Richard Delgado and Gene Stefanchik wrote the following, quote, "The critical race theory movement," pause there. Now, it calls it a movement, so it's not just a theory. These are law professors who wrote this in their book in 2001. Okay, race theory movement is a collection of activists and scholars interested in studying and transforming the relationship among race, racism, and power. So it's not just a theory. They're putting things into practice when they teach CRT and they spread it around the United States. All right, another quote from the same book. Unlike traditional civil rights, which stresses incrementalism and step-by-step progress, critical race theory questions the very foundations of the liberal order, including equality theory, legal reasoning, Enlightenment rationalism, and neutral principles of constitutional law. So, let me examine a few key points there with that quote. They don't think that equality was happening fast enough, so they thought CRT was an appropriate approach to try to fix that. Some injustices that they saw, whether real or perceived. And like I said in that quote, they decided to question pretty much everything, including the neutral principles of constitutional law. They want to question the Constitution. Another quote from that same book. Although CRT began as a movement in the law, it has rapidly spread beyond that discipline. Today, many in the field of education consider themselves critical race theorists who use CRT's ideas to understand issues of school discipline and hierarchy, tracking, affirmative action, high-stakes testing, controversies over curriculum and history, and alternative and charter schools. So, through their own admission in their 2001 book, these legal scholars admit that CRT was already in education way back then. Here we are in 2022. All right. Next example. This one is CRT in education at the college and university level. So this paper is titled Toward a Critical Race Theory of Education. This was written in 1995. It's an article by Gloria Ladson Billings and William F. Tate IV. It's published in the Teachers College of Columbia University. So I'm just going to read quotes from there. I skipped down to the section where it says Critical Race Theory and Education. With this notion of property rights as a defining feature of the society, we proceed to describe the ways that the features of critical race theory mentioned in the previous section can be applied to our understanding of educational inequity. Racism as endemic and deeply ingrained in American life. If racism were merely isolated, unrelated, individual acts, we would expect to see at least a few examples of educational excellence and equity together in the nation's public schools. Instead, those places where African Americans do experience educational success tend to be outside of the public schools. While some might argue that poor children, regardless of race, do worse in school, and that the high proportion of African American poor contributes to their dismal school performance, we argue that the cause of their poverty, in conjunction with the condition of their schools and schooling, is institutional and structural racism. So, I'm going to pause there. Critical race theorists, of course, they believe that the entire American system was structured to oppress all minorities, specifically black people in this paper. Thus, when we speak of racism, we refer to Wellman's definition of culturally sanctioned beliefs which, regardless of the intentions involved, defending the advantages whites have because of the subordinated positions of racial minorities. We must, therefore, contend with the problem facing white people of coming to grips with the demands made by blacks and whites while at the same time avoiding the possibility of institutional change and reorganization that might affect them. So that's just one example of CRT at the college and university level in a paper written in 1995. Here's another one. This one is by Daniel G. Solorzano from 1997, and it's titled Images and Words That Wound, Critical Race Theory, Racial Stereotyping, and Teacher Education. Oh my! More evidence that it's been in schools since way back when. Just a couple quotes from the intro page on this guy's article. It says, these two epigraphs by Chester Pierce and Derek Bell. Now, Derek Bell is credited as the man who coined the term critical race theory, by the way, are reminders of the lingering significance of racism and our inability to eliminate it from United States society. In this essay, I examine the linkages between an emerging theoretical framework in the law, critical race theory, and its relation and application, see, he's applying critical race theory, to the concepts of race, racism, and racial stereotyping in teacher education. Critical race theory draws from and extends a broad literature base that is often termed critical theory. So I'm going to stop there. My point with those two articles was just to prove to you that you can find evidence that CRT has been in education for years, decades at this point. But I am not done there, folks, because CRT is also in healthcare, and it's been in that for years as well, unfortunately. All right, so here's evidence of CRT in medicine. There's a student and resident letters to the editor. A call for critical race theory in medical education. This is a paper published in August of 2017 in the Journal of Association of American Medical Colleges. It's by Jennifer Tsai and Anne Crawford Roberts. These were medical students back then. Quote, critical race theory, born in legal studies and further developed in education scholarship, is a framework that centers experiential knowledge, challenges dominant ideology, and mobilizes interdisciplinary and intersectional methodology in order to examine inequality. So they always try to frame critical race theory as this innocent tool that they use. All we're doing is we're just using it. We're looking through CRT lens to look at inequities, to look at why these marginalized groups are suffering poverty at higher rates, or why they're being disciplined more often than white students. And conveniently, oftentimes you'll notice that they ignore many variables when it comes to things like discipline factors, like what's going on in the home life of these children, what's going on between peer-to-peer relationships between these kids. They ignore that and they just automatically assume racism. Racism is the cause every time. Racism, systemic oppression, whatever it is. Anything to paint white kids as the oppressors and minority kids as the oppressed, as the victim class every time. And then, of course, when you get into LGBTQ agenda, they also lump that in with the oppressed classes as well. Let me continue this quote from this article. Ultimately, it seeks to identify, analyze, and transform those structural and cultural aspects of society that maintain the subordination and marginalization of people of color. I'm going to stop there again. Okay, so these two authors, I'm going to just call them Marxist activists, because people who write in such plain language, such bold language, their points, they're legitimately claiming that white people are intentionally maintaining structures of oppression. Sorry, stumbling over my words. I promise I wasn't drinking alcohol before this video. So they just are constantly accusing white people of maintaining these structures of racism and oppression. And they want to keep minorities in their place. That's why they use words like subordination and marginalization of people of color. All right, continuing. Teaching CRT offers a process for physicians in training to meaningfully understand the causes and consequences of race and racism, namely by locating inequity and interrogating power structures. So, interrogating, they want to really look like real hard nitty-gritty into these power structures, like why are there so many white doctor faculty working in our colleges compared to minority faculty? It must be due to racism in the hiring practices. We got to fix that. We're going to have to start showing favoritism as a way to resolve that. So favoritism to minorities is a way to resolve that issue. That's what they mean when they're talking about equity. That's one of their ways that they try to achieve equal outcomes. So, it says, it equips learners with the faculty to recognize and articulate unjust practices against people of color in society and in medicine itself, and therefore represents an important strategy for addressing gaps in critical content and perspective in medical education. In light of persistent racial inequality, medical education should teach CRT so that future doctors are more prepared to discuss and treat racial inequities in and outside of the clinic. Now, sometimes you will find that CRT scholars will sometimes conflate the words equality and equity as if they mean the same things. They do not. Equality means you're treated or looked at the same under the law. You are treated as equals under the law. By the law is meant to be balanced. Equity is seeking to push for equal outcomes. Now, you might start off at the same place, and not everybody is going to have the same destination. But equity forces the same outcomes. In effort to do that, they have to take away from the successful. It's a utopian pipe dream. Can't happen here on this earth. We will never achieve true equity here on this earth. If you want equity, you need to seek the Lord for salvation and go to heaven. That's equity. This next one is titled Critical Race Theory, Race, Equity, and Public Health Toward Antiracism Praxis. Now, I think I've told you all before, praxis is just another word for putting it to work, putting CRT into reality, like realizing it. All right, this one was written in April 2010, and it was published in the American Public Health Association. It's by Chandra Ford, PhD, and Collins O. Ahir Henbua, PhD. I apologize, sir or madam, if I butchered your last name there. I'm just going to read from the abstract in that article. My mouth is dry. I should have brought a drink. All right, quote, racial scholars argue that racism produces rates of morbidity, mortality, and overall well-being that vary depending on socially assigned race. I'm going to pause there because that's another thing CRT scholars do that I've noticed and I only just started digging into CRT stuff like more deeply in this past year. They actually believe that race is a social construct. They believe that it was invented as a way to oppress different people of different nationalities and ethnicities. Let me just say that claim is insane. I'll just say that plainly. Continuing, eliminating racism is therefore central to achieving health equity. But this requires new paradigms that are responsive to structural racism's contemporary influence on health inequities, and research. Critical race theory is an emerging transdisciplinary race equity methodology that originated in legal studies and is grounded in social justice. These people who write this stuff are trying to create social justice warriors, folks. Critical race theory's tools for conducting research and practice are intended to elucidate contemporary racial phenomena, expand the vocabulary with which to discuss complex racial concepts, and challenge racial hierarchies. So, challenge racial hierarchies. Again, I made that example of white faculty. If you see too many white people in charge of a company or whatever, they're just automatically going to use CRT to claim that it's because of racism that happened, not because of meritocracy. By the way, they claim that meritocracy is oppressive too, and then it was that it's a white thing. Okay, continuing. We introduce critical race theory to the public health community, highlight key critical race theory characteristics like race consciousness, emphasis on contemporary societal dynamics and socially marginalized groups, and praxis between research and practice, and describe critical race theory's contribution to a study on racism and HIV testing among African Americans. CRT is negatively affecting our society, and it must be stopped. It needs to be banned from being taught as factual or a legitimate way of teaching about history or our society. It started at the college and university level, and it has obviously invaded corporations, the medical field, and K through 12 schools. Those who say otherwise, they're either lying to you or they're ignorant to what CRT actually is. CRT is something that we need to take serious. We can't thumb our noses at this, folks. So I'm asking that every one of you use at least the following 3 links to write your legislators, urging them to put a stop to this. They need to hear your voices. First, the link to House Resolution 1303, which I mentioned at the beginning of this video. If you click on that link, which all of these links that I'm mentioning are going to be at the bottom of my video in the description section. If you click on that link on House Resolution 1303, you can read over that. Read exactly what the resolution says. I encourage you always, if I'm going to be mentioning any sort of law, any sort of resolution, read it over before saying yes or no on whether you support things like that. Don't just take my word for it. Okay. Second link is something called a CRT Forward Tracking Project. Now, this is from the University of California, Los Angeles School of Law Critical Race Studies. They are tracking national efforts to fight CRT at all levels of education. So, if you click on that link, you see here you got a map that you can view of the whole United States, and you can kind of move it around. You can click on one section of the United States wherever you see these little icons. Like here's an example. I clicked on Big Walnut School Board Policy in Ohio. That's a local school district. So as you can see, this UCLA School of Law is tracking efforts to combat CRT across the United States. So, if you meet another liberal, leftist, Marxist, whatever they call themselves, whatever you deem them to be, and they continue to try to claim that CRT is not in our schools, show them that. Just show them that link and say, then why is this law school tracking anti-CRT efforts across the United States? That's all I got to do. Show them that website and then ask them that question. See what they say. All right. The third and final link that I wanted to provide in my video, and I plan to read this entire article. This is an article that was provided to me by one of my local teachers here in West Virginia. Now, this is assigned to high school students, and it's just one of many pieces of evidence that CRT is in K through 12 schools. By the way, I don't have just this as evidence that it's in my local schools. If you want more evidence, feel free to contact me, and I will provide. Okay, so this article is on rewirenewsgroup.com, and it's titled Notes from an Angry Black Hunter, Guns, Genocide, and the Stolen Ground You Own. Own is in quotes. This is written by Jonathan Hall, and I'm pretty sure he goes by the title Dr. Jonathan Hall. I think he's a doctor of ecology. He wrote this in February 2019 is when it was published. All right, here goes. Now, keep in mind, high school students are assigned this article. And don't you dare try to tell me that this article is not a manipulative way to make white kids feel guilty for their skin color and to make minority, specifically black kids, to feel like they're constantly being oppressed when you read this. If you try to claim that after reading this article, and I'm going to read it to you, and if you try to come to me face to face and try to claim this is not CRT, I'm going to say, you're a lunatic, you're lying, get out of my face. All right, here it goes. When I hunt, usually on white people's land, I wonder if they know who lived there before. Mr. Hall, they probably knew the previous owners that they bought it from. Maybe the ones before that. But to most people, it probably doesn't matter. and it's not just a white people thing. Okay, continuing. Or what would happen if I was just some random black man on their property? What would happen, Mr. Hall? Why would you be trespassing on their property? That's my question. What an interesting way to start off. If you identify as white or a hunter or a white hunter, what you are about to read should make you uncomfortable. So, he admits that's his purpose, to make white people feel uncomfortable. Here goes. In the United States, the story of the land is written in the blood of native people and centuries of forced labor by kidnapped Africans. So it's no wonder that more than 90% of land is owned, and he puts it in quotes. So he doesn't actually think that white people who own property in the United States actually are entitled to it. Property that they bought with their own money, often with their own sweat and blood. Okay, so 90% of land is owned by white Americans, and that includes the lands where I hunt. Maybe this is the first time you've thought about race, land, and hunting. Maybe you're surprised to be hearing this from a black hunter. No, not really. Hunting talk rarely involves race and blackness. Yes, because hunting is hunting. Everybody can hunt, regardless of their skin color. So no, I'm not surprised, and I don't really talk about race when I go hunting. I hunt with men, sometimes women. Okay, but that rarity is no more an accident than the absence of indigenous people from the land. So he's claiming that the reason why you don't hear stories about a whole lot of black people hunting is because it was done on purpose. Okay. It's been more than a year since I appeared on the West Virginia episode of the late Anthony Bourdain's Parts Unknown show and wrote an article titled Hunting While Black. I'm going to stop there because I want to mention that article is also assigned to high school students in my local school district. You can look that up and find it for free online as well. He says, I've gotten a lot of positive feedback, but I'm most proud of comments where people expressed thanks for being challenged to think more closely about race and hunting. To be fair, I hadn't thought all that thoroughly about the connections between white supremacy and the land until recently. I'm wondering, I'm going to pause there again. I'm wondering if this recently is when he was going to school for his doctorates, because I believe he mentions in his other article that he received his doctorate in West Virginia, in I think WVU. Okay, he says, my interest in the connection came slowly from my experience as a black person and black ecology student. Ha! See? Yep. If I would just keep reading, the answer is right there. And from other black scholars and citizens who knew and lived this history. After hearing scholar and activist Carolyn Finney, author of Black Faces, White Spaces, Reimagining the Relationship of African Americans to the Great Outdoors, speak last year, I was inspired to keep learning and speaking about the importance of understanding the connections. In her talk, Finney explained the difference between anger, which she defined as legitimate disquiet rooted in witnessing or experiencing injustice, and bitterness, the paralyzing toxicity that often follows anger. She tries to avoid bitterness, but she's angry about things, including how land in the United States is distributed. Interesting word choice, Mr. Hall. How is land distributed? Because I'm pretty sure if you had your way, you would have land redistributed forcefully via the government. There are words for that, and they're not pleasant. Continuing. Throughout her talk, I was jolted out of my general fanboy malaise. I'm a huge admirer of Finney's work. By a single sentence, she kept repeating, "All this land was stolen." I'm going to pause again because this sentence that kept repeating in his mind is in fact a lie. All this land was not stolen. Some of the land was legitimately purchased from the natives who lived here before the Europeans. And also, as many conservatives like to point out, because it is a legitimate point, all these tribes, these Native Americans that were here in these United States before the Europeans arrived, they weren't all united. They were often enemy tribes. They often pillaged each other's villages. They fought for each other's land. They fought for each other's women and children. They stole from each other. They scalped each other, some of them. So, they weren't necessarily united. They weren't necessarily all happy-go-lucky, fun little friends, like people imply. Anyways, like Finney, I'm angry about whiteness. In my Parts Unknown article, I took special care to craft my words so that white folks wouldn't be turned off. Aw, thank you, Mr. Hall. That's very kind of you to not turn us off. That's what one has to do to appeal to a mainstream audience. But nice is not how I feel about whiteness. I'm going to pause there, folks, because when a teenager reads that, a white teenager, when a white teenager reads that from a grown black man, that's going to conjure up some feelings. And they're not going to be good feelings. Like he said, he's doing this on purpose to make white people feel uncomfortable. He's making a point that he's angry. He feels betrayed by the land that was all stolen. As I continue on, you'll see real quick that he wants to link past racism, past oppression. He wants to link all of that and lump it onto current white people. And that's what lots of these CRT Marxists, communists do. They want to lump past oppression on people who are alive today and make them feel guilty for the sins of their fathers or their forefathers. It's interesting that they do that, but yet they don't want to give credit for the good things that the fathers and forefathers did. Accomplishments in technology, accomplishments in clothing, accomplishments in agriculture. No, white people didn't learn all their agriculture from the Native Americans. Anyone who says that is lying. All right. Let me continue before I digress too much. I'm angry that the original people of these lands have been and continue to be stripped of their sovereignty. They were stripping each other of sovereignty constantly before white people arrived. I'm angry that the civilization that's tried to replace theirs is really good at ignoring justice. I'm angry that horrific white violence has shaped the way so many people of color live in this country. I'm angry that so many well-meaning, good white folks daily choose not to see the giant festering wounds of trauma their ancestors inflicted, and they, through their willful ignorance of whiteness, perpetuate. So that last sentence, I'm going to review real quick, because no matter how much you beg and plead and try to side with these Marxists, these communists, these CRT pushers, it's never going to be enough. So, as you can see, he doesn't even think that the efforts of the good white folks are enough. He thinks they're not doing enough to examine the trauma that their ancestors inflicted. Like, the way he talks about white people in this article, it's just disgusting to me, folks. I mean, and he'll say, well, they deserve it. Bet you if you ask him, he'll say something stupid like that, but I don't know. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt, actually. Let me continue. And it's not as if this history is new. White supremacy goes a long way to explaining rural land ownership and how little of that land is owned by black people. I'm talking specifically about the terrorism that black people suffered after the Emancipation Proclamation, Lincoln's assassination, and President Andrew Johnson taking office. That includes almost 4,000 reported lynchings from 1877 to 1950. Now, I'm going to stop there because these are legitimate. Some of these are legitimate facts. I mean, these are real things. After the Emancipation Proclamation, slavery didn't just snap fingers and disappear that quick. There were still states that lingered in freeing the slaves. And I forget which year it actually officially ended. And it wasn't Juneteenth, folks. When you hear about Juneteenth, that actually wasn't the very last state to end slavery. Anyone who's claiming that has that fact wrong. All right. Continuing, he says, we know about the Great Migration, but don't formally educate our children about why so many black people decided to leave the South in search of better opportunities up north. They were running from terrorists who threatened their lives and lynched those who resisted. That trauma and violence still operates today. How does it operate today? Oh, Jussie Smollett. Okay. This structural and interpersonal violence was just the next step in the evolution of the white supremacist colonial state. You evil colonizers. Every time I interact with white landowners negotiating access to their land for hunting, I wonder, do they know this history? Is it part of their day-to-day reality that the same way that farm maintenance is an ever-present reality? No, I doubt that it's part of their day-to-day reality because they have life to live, Mr. Hall. They don't want to obsess over race all the time and racism. And you really shouldn't either. It's healthier if you just actually learn to move on. It would be better for you, Mr. Hall, if you learned to grow beyond your Marxist tendencies, grow beyond your hyper-focus on race. Because racism is not around every corner like you've been taught and like you are teaching people in nonsense articles like this. Continuing, audience, do they even know the name of the people who lived on their land before they got there? I wonder how they treat black people they don't know. Are they suspicious of them? Does their familiarity with me insulate me from their racial hostility? I'm going to pause again because I really should cut him some slack. Because I believe in his other article, he mentions that he came from a big city. I think he even mentions he came from New York City, if I'm not mistaken. So he does come from a much different experience than West Virginia. Way different. And the reason why I say I want to cut him some slack is because my own father dated a black physician's assistant who lived in New York City. They met online, and when they first talked about meeting, her family was actually afraid for her to travel down to meet my dad in our home state, because they heard how racist the people in my area of the United States are. They heard all these stories, all these negative stories that they're told about white people in big cities and urban areas. And after she spent time with my dad, met my grandparents, met a bunch of my other family members, my cousins, aunts, uncles, she was relieved, of course, and her family was relieved. And then when my dad went to go visit her, they welcomed him with open arms. Everything was honky-dory. But I think there was a big, like a culture shock type of thing that happened when they realized, oh, not every white person in that area is racist, like we were told. So, I encourage all y'all, no matter where you come from, read perspectives of people from across the United States. Not every American is bad. And from my personal experience and in my personal opinion, racism was dead and dying. And even Thomas Sowell says this in one of his quotes, I believe. Talks about it, I think, being on life support, or maybe I'm attributing that quote to him that actually belongs to someone else. I don't know. But I was actually saying something similar back when President Barack Obama came into office and all these racial tensions started stirring up and everything. Granted, there were legitimate racists. There were actual racists in crowds that were protesting Barack Obama being president. I want those types of people shunned completely. They don't belong in a regular society. They don't belong in modern American society at all. They should be ostracized. They should be rejected at every turn by all Americans. But before Barack Obama came into office, it seemed like I heard nothing about racism. And I grew up in a majorly white hillbilly county. There were very few black people where I grew up. I probably met one actual racist. And even he was like he was secretive about it, and he would make these comments, slurs. I don't think he ever actually said the N-word, but when me and some of my other friends discovered that he didn't have the greatest view against black people, we made fun of him. We picked on him, and we shunned him. As everyone should, people like that. Really, people like that, everybody deserves love, but people don't need to be racist. It's 2022. Cut the crap. All right, let me continue Mr. Hall's article. I don't hunt public land because white men with firearms and a reason to discharge said firearms make me incredibly nervous. So, right here he is insinuating that all white men who hunt on public land have the potential to just randomly shoot him because he's black. And he says, just ask the family of Garrick and Carl Hopkins of Cable County, West Virginia. 2 black men killed by their white neighbor for trespassing on their own land. Now you can actually click on that story. Gary and Carl Hopkins. So I found this article from the Herald Dispatch, Huntington, West Virginia. Barbersville. Garrick Hopkins and his wife Denise celebrated their 9th wedding anniversary Friday, just hours before their dream of home ownership was shattered. Now, this article was written in 2014. Sorry, I should have started with that. Garrick Hopkins, 60, and his brother Carl Hopkins, Jr., 61, were killed as they toured the couple's newly purchased land south of Barbersville. Authorities arrested the Hopkins' future neighbor, Rodney Bruce Black, charging the 62-year-old with 2 counts of first-degree murder. Court documents allege Black spotted 2 men shaking the door of a nearby shed, grabbed his .243 caliber rifle, and fired the fatal gunshots without warning. The gunshots traveled approximately 120 feet. So if you go on, I'm not going to read the whole article, but if you go on it, Rodney Bruce Black claims that, or he admits to the fact that he did not give the 2 men a warning before he shot them. He did not call 911. He didn't even, he just took it upon himself to just shoot these men. And he thought that the shed was part of his property. He thought they were on his property. That's the claim. But one thing you will find missing from that article, and I read through 2 of them about that incident, and nothing indicates that this guy who shot Garrick and Carl Hopkins, nothing indicates that it was racially motivated. So, it has no legitimate purpose to even be in this article by Jonathan Hall. He just added it to stoke up division. Oh, but he doesn't stop there. 2 black men killed by their white neighbor for trespassing on their own land. Philando Castile's 2016 death makes any encounter with police to and from a hunt much more dangerous for me. Do I tell the officer I have a firearm in the car? No, you don't have to tell the officer. If I don't, and he decides to search my car, what happens if he finds the firearm I didn't disclose? As long as you are obeying the law, usually nothing happens. Can we have a conversation about what justice looks like in the aftermath of genocide and anti-black violence? I don't know what he means by genocide there, because he makes no linkage to any historical fact. The answer from the hunting community has been a deafeningly loud but silent no. I do appreciate the praise and comments sparked by my Parts Unknown appearance and article. If I have one response to the feedback I'm still hearing, it would be that white people have to do right by the people murdered and terrorized by their ancestors. Yes, you white people have to do right by what your ancestors did. Hashtag reparations now. Doing right means learning this history and the realities of the land on which we live. All this land was stolen. Again, that's a lie, Mr. Hall. Not all the land was stolen. Yes, you have a responsibility to live up to the ideals you say this country was founded on, especially as the stewards of the spoils of a racist enterprise. No, you didn't start this enterprise. Hey, at least he says that. And no one is blaming you for the injustices levied before you had agency. Thank you, Mr. Hall. Oh, but he's not done. He says, but I'm realistic. 99% of white people are terrible at talking about racism. Ha! There goes all the nicey nice talk that quick. That's not hyperbole either. Most white people absolutely suck at talking about race. Take these responses I've gotten on my Hunting While Black article from well-meaning white folk. And he quotes a white person here that says, I agree with you that outdoor spaces are highly racialized, and I think your concerns about hunting while black are legitimate. And his imagined response in his article, he says, thank you for that affirmation. And he's condescending, of course, in his tone. He does it on purpose, like I'm doing through the whole article. Thank you for that affirmation. I'm both glad you're telling me that you think my experience is legitimate and that you are concerned that I know that you think my experience is legitimate. Or, and then he quotes another person, one of my first thoughts was, this guy is way outside the box, and I love it, not only because you are a black man living in West Virginia who hunts, but add to that, has a PhD in ecology and teaches in the Department of Geography too. In his imagined response, he says, who knew Negroes could live in West Virginia, have a PhD, and teach in a real-life college department? That's so far outside the box that it boggles the mind. I must tell this magical Negro that he is special because he certainly hasn't heard that before, and I'm sure being reminded that he's almost completely alone in his identity is outweighed by a random white person telling him he's special. This guy sounds like a jerk, folks. All right, he says, and then, hey, I read your article about hunting in West Virginia. Good stuff. This guy just can't take a compliment, apparently, because his imagined response is, say it with me, white supremacy. My article was really about white supremacy. But I pitched it gently because white people take it personally when you point out that many of their ancestors were terrible people and that many more did little to nothing to stop the really bad ones. Told you I was angry, he says. But at this point, I want to cut white folks the tiniest bit of slack. Thank you, Mr. Hall, for cutting us some slack. I really appreciate it. When you consider the legacy of segregation, it makes sense that most people, particularly white people, live in physical and social spheres of extreme racial homogeneity. Oh, you mean like you did when you lived in New York City? And you thought all white people were racist before you moved here? Well, yeah. I know the homogeneity thing well. After all, I am the first African American faculty member in my department. I was the first African American to earn a PhD in ecology from my department in 2011, and am currently one of 2 African American tenure-track faculty in a college with almost 300 faculty. I feel the overwhelming whiteness of my environment, but can count on one hand the number of white people I've met along the way who were keenly aware of how distressing it is being the only black person in so many spaces. I get white folks' resistance to learning about the wages of whiteness. It must be hard for a white person, in the same way that learning Disney has a long history of being incredibly racist. Sorry, not sorry. It's hard. Being racially introspective is work people of color know how to do. We do it as a matter of survival. White folks avoid the work of understanding racism as a matter of happiness. You can't know that. He can't know that. White people avoid the work of understanding racism as a matter of happiness. He just makes this random claim, this random statement. Not based in fact, it's based in emotion, and it's probably based in his fear. Remaining ignorant to racism versus moving to change it is like choosing between riding in first class in a 15-hour flight or having to write an entire astrobiology dissertation on the same flight while seated in an economy class middle seat between a screaming child with irritable bowels and a heavy sleeping cuddler who open-mouth snores after eating 2 orders of garlic bread with extra garlic. Why would anyone reject that first-class seat? The catch, of course, is that you forfeit any legitimate claims of living justly by choosing the first-class seat. If you never acknowledge the fundamentally unfair system that created your comfort and the structural discomfort of others, then what do phrases like all men are created equal, or unalienable rights, or life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness actually mean? So he's claiming that if you don't admit and acknowledge that America was built on, was fundamentally built to oppress all minorities, then you can't also believe that all men are created equal. You can't believe in unalienable rights, and you cannot believe in life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. U.S. society will not fundamentally change unless white people embrace the discomfort that comes with being white. Full stop. There is no discomfort that comes with being white. There's no inherent discomfort that comes with it. And there really is no inherent discomfort that comes with being any color. America is a land of opportunity. Ask people who move here from other countries and make it big. They succeed, start their own businesses, thrive. Why are they doing so well? Why are the legal immigrants who come here making so much money? Why are they able to give back to their communities so much more than people who were born, some of the people who were born here and who just want to gripe and complain? Why is that? What white people have collectively done to make this country more just is not enough. You have to do more. Every single white person. And you know this is true because articles like this one, are still necessary, still controversial, and will still result in white people's blind anger at the mere mention of their responsibility for racism. Don't be angry at people of color for pointing this out. The forefathers and foremothers whom many of you venerate, who designed this genocidal and racist society, are to blame. They sold you out for a shot at first class on a stolen credit card and stuck you with the bill. Your anger should be aimed at them, not people of color. Mr. Hall, my anger is not aimed at people of color or at forefathers and foremothers. Just so you know. The Bible says, we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. I know that the real enemy that I have to fight against is an unseen enemy, and that I can only defeat that enemy through the help of the Holy Ghost, through the help of the Lord God Almighty. I ain't angry with anybody, and I am not a grudge holder. And I really wish other people wouldn't hold grudges for things that people today did not do. All right, let me finish. Almost done. The good news is there are millions of people of color ready to work with you on building a truly just society, when we know you can be trusted to not do us harm. But until the day comes when the majority of white people take justice seriously, I'm going to avoid public land hunts, wear double and blaze orange that's needed, and drive below the speed limit when my firearm is in the car. I wish everyone happy, safe, and successful hunting this year, especially the black hunters. Well, in the words of drunk Barney Fife, bless his heart. Was that a good impression? Did you like it? I impressed myself. All right. That's all the articles I had to read. I'm going to wrap it up here. Folks, if you enjoyed today's episode, please give it a like. Please comment below. Tell me what you thought. Make sure you subscribe to my channel. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel, my Rumble. Give it a Rumble if you're watching on Rumble. And share the video. Whenever you share my content, always use the hashtag #RallyCryForKids. Well, what am I supposed to say? Oh, what's the phrase? Remember, folks, be bold as lions.